Okay, yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jeff. I'd call myself a beginner to Python and to programming. I previously worked in healthcare in the lab, and I'm trying to change careers to something in the tech field. I really enjoy learning Python and other programming languages like Java and learning Linux. And so yeah, I'm a beginner, and a lot of beginners, they create an app and they want to have it, they want to put it online, they want to deploy it online, and deployment is something that's kind of tricky for even experienced developers. So Heroku is a platform as a service. It's a service that it's pretty easy, relatively easily, hopefully, um, to deploy a website or web app, and they have a generous free tier. And I'll show how to deploy an app. We'll actually deploy an app live during this presentation. I created a GitHub repository, and it was in the meetup notes, in the meetup event. Let me see if I can get a link to it. Just one moment. Try to put that in the chat. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna basically follow this repository, the README file. Heroku, it's a free service. Their documentation is a little bit hit or miss. As a beginner, I tried deploying on Amazon AWS first, and that was a little bit of a challenge. And I tried deploying. I heard Heroku could be easier to deploy, but their documentation is kind of hit or miss, especially for Django. I was able to deploy an app on AWS, and I tried doing that on Heroku, and I hit some snags. So yeah, Django is a Python web framework. You can use it to build websites and web applications. Flask is like another web framework, Python web framework, and it's a little bit easier to use to deploy. So in this presentation, I'm gonna use Flask to deploy a very basic website onto Heroku. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Okay, Josh, do you think you could let me share my screen?
Is Josh still here?
Oh, Josh is not here. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Just a moment.
Okay, I guess Josh
okay,
is
you should be able to. Sorry about that. Yep, you should be all set.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I have the GitHub repository open. Can someone just like yell, or I can't really share my screen. So can someone just let me know if they can see the screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to basically go through this. And so it basically lists all the steps. So yeah, these are the requirements over here. We need to create a free Heroku account. We need Git on our computer, and we need the Heroku client. So to create a Heroku account, we just go to this link over here. I'm not going to actually go through all the steps. I've actually already signed up. But yeah, here's a link to sign up. And so that's to sign up for the free Heroku account. And we just need to also make sure Git is on our computer. If you're on Mac or if you're on Linux, if you type Git version in a terminal, if you already have Git, you should see something like Git version 2.32.0. That means you already have Git installed. You can have a different version. It's okay if it has a slightly different number. If you don't have Git installed, you can use this link over here. GitHub has a link, has a guide on how to install Git for Mac, for Linux, for Windows. So you could use that. And here's some directions if you need to configure your Git. And so there's 3 steps. You have create a free Heroku account, set up your Git, and the last one is to install the Heroku client for Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. I did this on Linux. It worked. I was able to get it to work on Linux. The documentation for Heroku, they have a short video that does it on Mac OS. So it should also work on Mac OS as well. Windows, I put some links. It might be a little bit tricky on Windows. So I put some links over here to help with installing the Heroku client on Windows. So I've already done these 3 requirements, and when you are signing into Heroku for the first time and you create your account, you'll open up a terminal, and you'll type in Heroku login, and it'll authenticate your account with the previous one that you created. So we can start building our app now. So those steps I've already done. I'm going to go to the terminal now using a Linux terminal. Most of the steps should be pretty similar if you're using a Mac. And if you're using Windows, there's something called Windows Subsystem Linux. And it's basically like a Linux computer in your Windows, on Windows. So we're going to go to the directory, the folder that we want to start our project. And you can call it whatever you want. So I have Heroku projects. I just created a folder for that. Do ls to list what I have in the folder right now. Also, just feel free to just interrupt with any questions. Yeah, I can't see the chat, so yeah, definitely feel free to interrupt with any questions. So I'm gonna create a Python virtual environment. So yeah, Python, we use virtual environments to avoid conflicts between different Python versions. And to create a Python virtual environment, there's actually many different ways to create a virtual environment. Here's one way. This is the way I'm going to use. And since I already have one called VNV, I'm going to call it VNV2. So Python 3 -m VNV VNV2, that's to create a virtual environment, and it's going to take a few seconds. So let's just finish that and just do ls to list. So, and to open the virtual environment, I'm going to do source VNV2, bin activate. And if you look on the left over here, you'll see this VNV2 in parentheses. That means our virtual environment is open. So yeah, this whole process I'm doing right now, it's a little bit longer because I'm talking through it all. But if you, you probably can get an application up and running in less than 15 minutes if you've already have your application set up and ready to go. So it might sound longer since I'm going through every step, but yeah, if you're experienced, if you've done it before, yeah, it should probably take less than 15 minutes. But yeah, so we activated our virtual environment, and see what's next. And I'm going to go to the virtual environment that we created. So I'm going to go to cd vnv2. And if I do ls, we'll see this is the virtual environment I created. And the next step, I'm going to clone the repository that I created to help as a template. You could also do git init and create your own application, like if you wanted to do it that way. But for like a demonstration, if you wanted to, if you already have like a Git repository of an app ready to go, you could just clone it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And so it cloned that. I'm just going to do ls to see what we have. So this is the repository that I cloned. So I'm just going to change to that. Okay, so this is what we have in this Heroku Flask Hello World. And we're going to install the requirements. We're going to install some Python library. So we're going to install Python Flask, GUnicorn. So yeah, Flask is like the Python web framework that we're going to use to build a basic website. GUnicorn is a web server gateway interface that allows Python to talk to a traditional web server. And optionally, you can install PyTest if you want to write some PyTests. So I'm going to install these three. Okay, so I just installed Flask. I'm going to install GUnicorn. Okay, and I'm also going to install PyTest. Okay, so I want to just do ls to see what we have. So some important files that we have are the app.py. That's where a lot of our applications, for at least this repository, that's where a lot of our program code will live. And there's also a proc file. That's an important file. Requirements.txt and runtime.txt. Those are all important files. I will briefly go over what each one does. So app.py, yeah, that's where like the logic or our apps programming, the code, that's where most of that lives. The proc file, this is a file, it doesn't have a file extension, it's just a proc file, and this lets Heroku know how we want to set up our app. So this is what our proc file looks like. It's letting Heroku know we want a web app. We're going to use GUnicorn as the web server gateway interface to let Python talk to the traditional web server. Our program application is in the file app, and log file that we're setting up some logs, logging. And for Windows computers, the documentation is kind of, I unfortunately didn't test this on a Windows computer, but if you use the link above, you might, and you use Windows Subsystem Linux. So if you use this link, these two links for Windows, that should avoid some issues with the proc file. But if you do encounter an issue with the proc file, let me go back to where I was. If you do encounter some issues with the proc file, this link might help with that on Windows. And yeah, so that's for Windows. So yeah, that's a proc file. It kind of declares to Heroku what our app is going to be doing and it needs. Runtime.txt. This tells Heroku what Python version we're running. So if you're not sure what Python version you have, you can just type in Python -- version, and it'll tell you. And we'll put that in a file called runtime.txt. And requirements.txt, this is like another file that tells Heroku what libraries we need. Like, so this is what ours looks like. It has Flask, has GUnicorn. Yeah, it has a lot of other requirements. If you don't do pip install PyTest, you'll have fewer requirements. And to let a fast way to create this requirements.txt file is to do pip freeze the greater than symbol and then requirements.txt. So let's do that. So yeah, I did pip freeze the greater than symbol of requirements.txt, and these are all the requirements that we're telling Heroku that we need. So next, we can just test our application locally by running Flask run. So this is not going to deploy to Heroku. This is just if you want to see how it looks on your computer. So yeah, this is a development server, and I mean, it's not for production. It's just like a test server. So we can see what our application looks like. It's a really simple one. Don't expect much. So yeah, I right-clicked on that address. I'm just going to do open link, and so it just gives a basic hello world message. If we use this address, it's like a local host address and port 5000. I created another endpoint, and so if you go to hi, it says hello RocPy. So it's a really very simple website. So I'm just going to do Control-C to stop the test server, the development server. Let's see what's next. Okay, so yeah, we did Flask run to see how our app looks locally, like on our computer. And so now we're going to actually deploy it to Heroku. So we're going to do Heroku create. And so yeah, you'll have to, at this point, you'll have to have already created your Heroku account, and you'll, the first time you log into Heroku in your terminal, you'll have to do Heroku login, and it'll authenticate you. It'll do that the first time. So I've actually already done that on my computer, so we won't have to do the login part, but so to start deploying it, I'll do Heroku create. So let me do that. So it just created an app. It started creating our app, and on Heroku we still have a few more steps to do. So yeah, we did Heroku create, and next we're just going to do git status to see if there's been any changes to the repository that we need to commit. And so it says on branch main for Heroku, your branch needs to be called main. If it's called master, here's some directions on how to change it to main. You just type in git branch -m master main, and that'll change it. It'll change the branch to main. If you have an older version of Git, it might call your branch master instead of main. But yeah, there looks like there's nothing to commit. So we typed git status, and there's nothing to commit. If there was something to commit, we would do. If there was something to commit, we would do git add the file. There's different Git workflows. This is one workflow. So there's other ways to, Git flows can vary. But yeah, this is one way to commit a Git file. You do git status, and then if there's something to commit, you can do git add and the file name. And usually it's probably a good idea to do git status again, just to make sure you haven't missed anything. And if you have something to commit, then you'll do git commit -m and then the commit message. So for us, we don't have anything to commit. The GitHub repository that we cloned, we haven't made any changes to it. So yeah, next we're going to do git push Heroku main, and that's going to actually start the deployment process. So git push Heroku main. So it's deploying it right now. It's going to take a few seconds. If there were any errors, you should see some of them over here. There's also a way, I can show you another way to check errors after it's done deploying. So yeah, this is going to be the address we're going to use. It has like some code names, like ancient reaches is the beginning of our website. And so yeah, it's done deploying. There weren't any errors that I can see over here. So yeah, this is a link. You want to click on or use the address with a .com. Don't use this address. You'll get if you try typing this in your web browser, you'll get an error. So use this one that ends in .com. And so just open link. And so yeah, that's our new app we just deployed. It says hello world. We created another endpoint that ends in hi and hello RocPy. So yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely easy. I mean, it's definitely possible to deploy a simple app like in less than 15 minutes using Heroku. So that's the basics of Heroku. If you want to see a little bit more complicated application, I have a different application on Heroku. And
Jeff, could I ask you a question?
Sure, definitely, yeah.
Thanks, man. That was really cool. Thank you for showing that. I was just wondering, so you showed us at the end there that you were able to go in your browser and view your web app. So presumably, like anybody would be able to do that. Like I'd be able to do that from my computer too, for example.
Yeah. Let me type the website in the chat. Anyone
Okay.
can access
My
that.
question is actually, do you know if Heroku has any options for limiting who can access an app that you host? Like if I wanted to make it only accessible to certain IPs, for example, is that possible?
Yeah, they probably have a way to limit access to it. I just don't know off the top of my head. Actually, I don't know a lot about Heroku, but yeah, you can also connect like databases to Heroku, but it's probably possible to limit access. There's large companies that use Heroku. I mean, not super large, like one Python podcast called Real Python. Like they have a lot of tutorials on their website. They actually use Heroku for like all their deployment. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's possible to, I mean, I just don't know how to do it to limit access. Are there any other questions?
Let me know. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So if there are no questions, I can just show another basic Heroku app that I created. Okay, so yeah, this is it. So Heroku, since like there's a free tier, if you have the free tier, if a website hasn't been loaded in like 30 minutes, it shuts down. So like free is great, but yeah, one drawback with the free tier is if there's no activity within like 30 minutes, it shuts down. So the first time you load a website, it can take like 7 seconds or so, but I like RSS feeds. And so I created a simple, like a really basic Flask web app using RSS feeds. And here's like this web app checks the NPR RSS feeds. And I also created another one in Django that combines some other RSS feeds in addition to NPR, but here's like a basic example of a Flask application. And to, I guess, make it look more like a traditional web application, like a website, you create a templates folder, like in the same, you could, there's different ways to structure your a Flask app, but if you, in the same, like next to your app.py file, you can create a templates folder, and you can create like an HTML file, and you can make your app look like more of like a traditional website. I have really horrible front end design skills, so this app looks really really basic. But you could put some styling, and for Flask, you can also do some basic programming in these in this templates folder in the index.html file. I have like a basic like a for loop over here. I have a list called stories list, and it's a for loop for each item in the list. It will print the story for the RSS feed. So that's one way to make, I guess, your Flask app look like a traditional app. And you can also serve static content. So yeah, I guess if don't really have anything else to show. If anyone, does anyone have any questions? So Heroku, you might wonder why it's free, and that might be like a marketing strategy to get more developers aware about the product. Yeah, because some larger organizations that don't want to pay for like a DevOps person, a DevOps person can easily cost like $5,000-6,000, $5,000, $6,000 each month. Some of them, some companies are a little bit bigger. They don't want to. They need some type of DevOps, but they don't want to pay. They're not, big enough to have a staff member take care of that. So Heroku can be that intermediate solution where they handle, I guess, they simplify a lot of the deployment, and yeah, I guess this is just a basic form of continuous integration and continuous deployment. What we just did right now, I guess it's really basic, a form of that. So you could save developer hours using Heroku. I think Real Python, that podcast and website that does Python tutorials, I think they said their Heroku bill is like $700 or $800 a month. And by paying that much, like $700 a month, they're able to keep a really, really small team. So I guess, but yeah, there's other platforms out there that Heroku is not the only one out there. It's just one common one recommended for beginners. And if you want to get something up running quickly and you're an experienced developer, it could be for experienced developers as well.
Jeff,
Yeah.
is this so if you wanted to make a production site, can you do that with a paid account on Heroku and you just direct the name server to that, and is that an actual production site or is it just for testing?
You can create a production a website using Heroku. Yeah, like Real Python is one example. Yeah,
no, that's a site. Okay.
So yeah, Heroku has different plans. Let me see. Yeah, they have different plans, and you can. So they use containers, and so yeah, you can use containers to create a production site, like a production-worthy site. This free tier probably won't be able to handle any that much traffic, but if you want something worthy of like being able to handle like I don't know, maybe 1 million hits a month or something like that, yeah, that's definitely an option.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can set up a database with this. Managing databases can be a little bit tricky as well, making sure there's backups and everything. So that's also something Heroku can do. And I think, yeah, the free tier also includes you can connect a very small database, and I think you can also connect Redis as well on the free tier as well. So yeah, these are the different tiers, the free and hobby. For the free and hobby, you can create like 5 projects, I believe, and have it run like up to like 550 hours. And that's all for free. It'll just shut down if there's no activity after 30 minutes. So, I mean, but that can go, a long way if you just have a personal project. If you just are working on personal projects yourself, like, or if you're a beginner and just learning, the free tier can actually get you pretty far. And yeah, they have a production tier that offers more. In enterprise, yeah, I mean, hopefully, if you find, deployment, it can be a little bit tricky and sometimes hold back beginners and even experienced developers. So, I mean, if you find a solution that makes deployment easier, hopefully that encourages you to write more code and share it with everyone in the world, or just to maybe just, booster your resume. If you want to have projects to put on your resume that are actually working, you can use Heroku for that as well.
Another thing that I've seen Heroku used for is, and I haven't actually done this, but I've used it. There are ways of producing, like putting into your GitHub repo a link that someone can click on that spins up that repo in a new Heroku instance. So like you can create some kind of an application that if someone wanted to spin up their own copy of it in Heroku, you can create some kind of a URL that will do that. So like all that person would have to do is have a Heroku login, and then in your Git repo, click that link that you can have in your README, and it would use that repo to spin up a new Heroku instance.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like it's nice to support companies that have, generous free tiers. I mean, I guess it's just smart marketing because, yeah, I mean, you might, if you're using that, for your personal projects, you might, try to use that, for your work projects. And yeah, there's so much more to. I didn't know that was something you could do with Heroku. Yeah, there's so much you can do. But I mean, there's other solutions out there. I mean, Heroku is not the only one. But yeah, if you're a beginner, sometimes there's so many choices out there. AWS is really, overwhelming. There's so many choices. You don't want to rack up a huge bill on AWS, and you need to know probably some Linux for AWS. So I mean, this is just one solution. Sometimes beginners, they're like, just tell me one thing and I'll do it. They don't. There's like, it can be overwhelming to deal with all these options and choices.
Yeah, AWS tends to be more traditional deployment focused. Like it makes the traditional servers and installation processes more dynamic, more dynamic backends, but you're doing all the same operations. Whereas here, they're putting more boilerplate together for you.
Great, yeah. And I think Heroku runs on AWS itself. I think one time AWS was down, so Heroku was also down as well. But I guess so many things rely on AWS.
Yeah, I would not be surprised.
And you can also use it for different languages, like I guess a Node and Go. There's a few different languages it supports.
And I also wanted to point out there was a question about preventing or making sites private. I don't know about networking, or they probably don't have, I don't know. Jeff, have you seen anything about VPN type networking stuff?
I haven't really actually explored all the options with Heroku.
Probably what they are, what's more aligned with their setup would just be having a login to your application to kind of put something in between you and in between the public and your content. So it would be part of your application.
I see something called, there's a tier called private.
Private. Yeah,
So
it might, yeah. I'd be interested to see how they implement that.
And I think at least initially they used Ruby on Rails to, Heroku uses Ruby on Rails. I don't know what they probably still use Ruby on Rails and containers.
I just saw trusted IP ranges there too.
Oh, okay, cool. See, I mean, I don't want to I don't want to sound like a shill for Heroku. I mean, there's other options out there. So I guess just find maybe, something that works for you. And this is just maybe one option. The thing with Python, I think sometimes, compared to maybe Node or other web frameworks, sometimes the Python options might be a little bit harder to find, but yeah, they are out there. I think, there's Python Anywhere is another option if you want something simpler to deploy an app. Yeah. And I think, Google, there's like a Google App Engine, but that's, I think, kind of pricey. And I guess Amazon also has some other services to make app development easier.
Lightsail.
Lightsail, okay, is that?
Yeah, I think that's probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as easy, but it's probably.
Yeah, it's definitely lower cost, but it's still, yeah. Not. I've only briefly played around with it. I do believe it does add some boilerplate functionality to streamline things, but you definitely still have it's basically just a virtual server instance up there.
Awesome. Does anyone use Flask or Django or any other Python web frameworks? I guess if you don't use, if you're not developing web applications, this is maybe not as, relevant. But if you have I guess Jupyter notebooks are a nice, convenient way to share code. But if you wanted to, share your Python code with, the greater world, maybe someone that doesn't use Jupyter notebooks, or, say like a family member, if you want to show some of your, I guess, Python, you can, Flask is a little bit flexible. It's not as, it's not super complicated, I guess. I mean, compared to other web frameworks to make your, to create a Flask app. Sorry, was there a comment or question?
So I was just going to respond to that question.
Yeah.
I started building a lightweight web presence, website based on Flask. Found it pretty pretty true to its brand. You know, it's not very opinionated. Just do what you need to do to get the job done and get the heck off.
Great. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I won't be hosting it on Heroku. I want to put it on App Engine because I have other assets on Google that I want to connect to. And so it allows me to connect to Google, you know, storage and other things a lot easier. If I were outside of Google, then I would have to take care of additional security.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I guess Google has like Firebase. I'm not sure if it's
Well,
yeah,
so
maybe.
mine is not on, my database is not on Firebase.
Oh, okay. But yeah, they have a lot of tools to make development easier. I guess, yeah, that's like one thing. Sometimes it's easier to spend a little bit of money to save your time. I mean, save hours, your development time. Yeah, that's great. Django is great as well. Like, I guess it's just deploying Django. There's a few more steps. So it's a great web framework, but yeah, if you want something a little bit easier to deploy, maybe Flask. Yeah, if you're a beginner, maybe a Flask would be one option.
Yeah, the one thing with Django is that it does require a database. I believe it requires a database at least. Actually, I guess unless if you don't if you don't add the database aspects to it, then you could potentially create a website that doesn't utilize a database. But that's the typical implementation. A more typical implementation with Django would use a database. That's where it really shines.
Yeah, Flask, you have to, I guess, connect, I guess, different pieces. Like Flask, you would have to connect the database yourself, or yeah, I guess someone said it's not opinionated, and yeah, that's right. So you would have to do the work to connect like the database. Yeah, Django, yeah, it comes with, so it's a little bit, has more built-in options.
Yeah, Django is more, it's bigger. So Flask would be considered just a portion of what Django is. So a lot of times if you're bringing a database interface into Flask, you're going to be bringing in something like SQL Alchemy or something that would help you interface with the database, where Django has that part built into it.
Jeff, I got to run to a meeting, but I just wanted to say thanks. This has been really interesting, and we're using Flask and CouchDB at work.
Okay, awesome.
Project. So this is
yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah,
thanks.
Appreciate it.
All right, great. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Well, this has been really great, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, happy to share.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
So if no one else has anything, I think we shall call tonight.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Josh. Take care.
Yes, take care.
Have a good one.